to Mark Gibson Shumaris channel. Accountant with designations CPA, MBA, CMA, ACPA, ASA, Australia. Enjoy learning!
So today we'll discuss about the accounting process. This is part of the financial accounting and reporting. No? So this is basic accounting. So let's just review what you have learned from your basic accounting class and see if you still remember yung mga concept involved in the accounting process. No? So the accounting process, so of course, it usually starts with the source document. No? We have to analyze the source document. It could be a voucher, a sales invoice, or other source documents. No? Then we go to step number 2, which is to journalize the transaction. And as you know, when we say we journalize a transaction, it's basically recording it. No? So it's the book of the original entry. And then third step is to post it to the ledger. And when we say ledger, this is the book of the final entry. So basically, in journal entry, diba, we have a debit and credit. So all we have to do is to post it to the proper ledger account. No? And of course, step 4, we then now have to prepare our unadjusted trial balance. Unadjusted in such a way that we just simply put the debit and credit in the trial balance, and that's it. And then we'll go to step number 5, which is the recording of the adjusting entries. No? And then later on, we'll cover what are these adjusting entries that we prepare, no, at month end. After completing all the adjusting entries, we then now prepare our financial statements. No, as you know, the integral part of the financial statements would be your balance sheet, your income statement, um, statement of changes in equity, your cash flow statement, and notes to financial statements. No, and then of course we have to record closing entries. No, by recording closing entries, we actually need to close our revenue and expenses, no, those nominal accounts, to your income summary account, and then ultimately to your retained earnings if it's a corporation, no, and if it's a sole proprietorship or partnership, and then you have to close it with the capital accounts. Next step is to prepare a post-closing trial balance, no? So, and then finally, we have to record reversing entries. Now, recording of the reversing entries naman is optional, no? Basically, we do reversing entries just to make sure that the next accounting period will be easier to track, no? So, I'll just check who's not unmuted, no? Para at least when we do the recording, it will be smoothless, no? All right. So that's the full accounting process. And as you know, on a monthly basis, we do this. We do report our financial statements with different regulatory agencies on a quarterly basis, and finally on an annual basis. No, that's the ultimate requirement. No, so if say for example you're engaged in private practice like myself, you'll be tasked, no, especially if it's a huge company. Usually it's bits and process lang naman, no? But in small medium enterprise, more often than not, you'll be responsible for the whole accounting process, no? Kaya nga usually, I mean, to get really the experience, it's better to start off with small medium enterprises, no? But in my case, that's also true, no? So I started working in a manufacturing company in Subic, and at that time, imagine, no, I'm only doing accounts payable, and it's very transactional. So imagine you have you will receive invoice from your suppliers, and then at the end of uh, during the month, you have to do adjusting entries, and of course, you have to pay for those invoices, and then you have to issue check. I remember at that time pa, we'll be setting up ano to, parang kiosk in the cafeteria, no? That's where we issued those checks to our suppliers, no? And of course, no, as you move up the ladder, it's a hierarchy, no? So, syempre simula start ka dun sa sa more transactional, and then sabi nga natin, as you learn and get yourself more experience, yun na. Mag-start ka syempre more on technical skills, and then sabi nga natin, as you move up the ladder of leadership hierarchy, ang expectation na sa'yo as an accountant is more on the soft skills na. So when we say soft skills, ito na yung mga decision making, interpersonal skills, communication. So kaya at the earliest stage of being an accountant, ang talagang hino-hone mo dyan is more of your technical skills, no? So dapat marunong ka analyze ang transaction, alam mo yung correct debit and credit, financial ratio analysis, no? And of course, no, as sabi nga natin, as you progress with your career, alam mo na yan. So iba ng level na yung ina-expect sa'yo, no? So that's the expectation for an accountant, no? Moving on. So ito na, puntahan natin step 1, journalize transaction. So of course, we have this so-called double entry bookkeeping, no? So with the debit and credit. So we say journal is book of original entry. So we have purchase journal, sales journal, where we book our sales, cash disbursement journal, and cash receipt journal. Now, if we're not able to categorize it between these first four journals, then we move it to the general journal, no? So next step is posting to the ledger. So basically, it's transferring the debit and credit items from the journal to the respective accounts in the ledger, no? So ledger is the book of final entry or summary of all transactions. So for example, you have debit AR, debit accounts receivable, credit sales, no? What we're actually doing in step number 2, posting to the ledger, is simply we post the debit to AR to the receivable ledger, and the credit to sales to the sales ledger, no? So it's just putting it imagine you have a T account, no? So you simply have to put it kasi syempre hindi lang naman ni isa yan, no? So imagine you have multiple sales transactions in a month, no? So it could be that you'll have say 20 or more sales transactions that you have to put into the ledger, no? So you have to do it one by one. But technically, right now, class, we have so-called accounting systems, no, that actually do all this work automatically in the system. But like I said, for the benefit of discussion, so we actually need to learn how to put this one by one, no? So that's actually what you've learned in your basic accounting. So like I said, this is just a review, no? So I'm sure all of these things that I keep on talking, alam nyo na yan, no? So pag-usapan natin yung mga adjusting entries. Again, this is just a review. Ano ba yung mga adjusting entries that are required to update the accounts at year end, no? So of course, number 1, we have the accrued revenue. So it's a debit to receivable and credit to the revenue account. So accrued revenue, simply these are revenue already recorded but not yet earned, no? So accrued expenses naman, so expenses already incurred but not yet paid, no? So of course, at year end, we have to post this and we have to adjust these balances, no, in order for us to get ano lang ba yung talagang dapat nating ma-account at the end of the year, no? Kasi we don't want to overstate our expenses and understate our revenue, no? Kaya that's the reason why we have to post this adjusting entries. Okay? So what else? So of course we have the depreciation. Now it's depending on the method of depreciation, but then the entries will remain the same naman. So of course we have a debit to depreciation expense and credit to accumulated depreciation. Accumulated depreciation is a contra account to your asset account, no? So there you have it, no? Next we have the bad debts. Of course, 'di ba, pag bad debts ito yung basically we provide how much of our AR is deemed uncollectible. So meaning usually nga huge companies, no, so like Xerox at the onset pa lang ng sales, so pagbenta pa lang, there's already a certain percentage involved to be adjusted as bad debt expense, no? So we do that to follow the generally accepted accounting principle. In fact, for the US generally accepted accounting principle, the requirement is 180 days. So sabi ng US GAAP, and US GAAP is being followed also in the Philippines. Sabi doon, AR aging 180 days and up, meaning over 180 days, we have to provide for allowance for doubtful accounts. And how we do that, it's basically a debit to your budget expense and a credit to allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so pag-usapan naman natin yung deferred income. Of course, the deferred income, we have two methods, no? So number one, we have the liability method, and number two, income method. So simply, in liability method, the original entry is posted in a liability account. And if it's under income method, so the posting is made to the income account. Now, the adjusting entries, of course, is to make sure that the liability account in the liability method, the deferred income, is adjusted, no? So that portion of that liability is transferred to the income account, no? Kasi nga, sabi natin, we have to make sure that the revenue is recognized at year end, no? So that's the liability method. Now, if it's an income method, so imagine, no? If it's an income method, the whole amount is already posted as income. Again, we don't want the revenue to be overstated, and that's the reason why nagkakaroon tayo ng adjusting entry. So to put some of those income back to the liability account, in order in so doing, ma-adjust natin yung income balance at year end, no? So that's deferred income under the income method. Okay? So ito, nag-i-imagine ka, pero parang ano na to eh, dahil nga review na lang, tinetest lang natin kung naaalala mo yung mga napag-usapan nyo during your basic accounting class. And in fact, later on, we'll have Kahoot quizzer, no? So at least to strengthen or to reinforce these concepts, no? So make sure to prepare your mobile phones with you so that you can participate with our Kahoot quizzer later. Okay, so next we have prepaid expense. So of course, pag sinabi natin prepaid expense, ito yung mga expenses that we prepay, no? So binayaran natin towards at the beginning of the year that we have to expense throughout the year, no? So paano ba yan? Usually ito insurance expense, no? So beginning of the year, you pay the premium for the full year. No? So, of course, we don't, in asset method, we recognize a prepaid expense or prepaid asset account. No? It's debit to prepaid and credit to cash. And then at year end, we do the adjusting entry to make sure that the amount already expensed is transferred to the expense account. Now, if it's an expense method naman, so all of the balances are booked in an expense account. So kung insurance nga yan, so debit insurance, expense, credit cash. Of course, at the end of the year, kung hindi pa lahat talaga yung nagamit, so say for example, we paid it at in March and for 1 year. So meron pa may iwan na 3 months towards December. So that 3 months, we have to put it under the prepaid expense account. No, so only 9 months should be expensed. Okay, so that's the adjusting entries for prepaid expenses. Of course, in merchandising inventory, meron naman tayong tinatawag na mga adjusting entries related to ending inventory. No? So, paano ba yan? Especially if you're a manufacturing firm, most of the time, napaka-busy niyan towards the end of the year. Bakit? Nagkakaroon sila ng inventory count. No? So, imagine you're working in a manufacturing entity who manufactures computer parts. No? So, in my case, yung first job ko nga, kinukwento ko sa inyo, I work in a manufacturing firm in Subic. So nangyari, all of the accounting personnel, parang ano kami, on-call kami, or skeletal, if I'm not mistaken. Skeletal kami noon, sino yung mga naka-assign sa warehouse at year-end. So imagine, while everybody else is celebrating the New Year's Eve, and nandun kami sa manufacturing plant to make sure that we will be able to count all the inventory. Alam mo naman pag computer parts 'yan, masyadong maliliit at marami talagang dapat bilangin. Of course, uh, do we don't count it 100%. No? So sometimes we just base it in the inventory records. I forgot the form for that, but we actually do just sampling. No? Although it's encouraged to do 100% inventory count at year end, especially if it's a periodic system. No? So, of course, the adjusting entries is to close the inventory ending balance to your income summary. Now, if it's a periodic system and function of expense, so what we're doing is we recognize cost of sales. No? So debit to cost of sales and credit to your inventory beginning and net purchases. No? So those are the entries for the ending inventory. Now, next step would be the closing entries. No? So basically, closing entries, we close all the nominal accounts. So when we say nominal accounts, these are temporary accounts. And temporary accounts are the accounts in your profit and loss statement or in your income statement. So ano ba yung nasa income statement natin? So we have the revenue account. Ito number 2, it should be expense. So close the expense accounts to income summary. And then finally, income summary to retained earnings. Of course, nilagay ko lang to sa ilalim. Sabi dyan, debit balance to income summary is a loss and a credit balance denotes income. Pero yan nga, alam nyo naman na yan. Ano? Kasi sabi nga natin at year end, so we close the balances to income summary and finally to retained earnings kasi nga retained earnings is basically our accumulated profit, no? So doon lahat na ilalagay towards the end. So that's closing entries. Now, ito pag-usapan natin reversing entries. Sabi natin reversing entries are optional entries. Optional in the sense na pwede mong hindi gawin. Pag hindi mo nga lang ginawa, it will appear that the next period would tend to be complex, no? Kasi alalahanin mo ano yung mga ni-record mo last year na kailangan mo i-establish ulit the following period, no? So we don't want those complexities, and therefore, we opt to do reversing entries. Pero ano lang ba talaga yung mga nire-reverse? So una, accruals on the accrued income and accrued expenses. And then on the deferral side, ito naman yung unearned revenue under income method and prepaid expenses under the expense method. Okay, so that's the first part of our discussion for today on the accounting process. Which is done first in the accounting process considering the following. Okay, so correct answer is adjusting entries are recorded. Kasi 'di ba, dun sa kung naalala mo yung chart na binigay natin kanina, nandoon lahat ng mga steps, no? Basically, ang tanong sa atin dito sa out of these four, ano yung nauna, no? So 32 of you got the correct. Which is done last in the accounting process. Isa pa, 59 dapat kayo eh. Okay, so of course, the last is prepare reversing entries. Kasi di ba, ito naman yung mga analyze transaction, that's step 1. Then record the transactions in journal and post-closing entries. No? So reversing entries would be the last, no? Out of these four. So 47 got the ba, mukhang mabilis kayo dito which is optional in the accounting cycle. Okay, so 46 of you got the correct answer. Meron pa rin nakamali, no? So I suggest for those who got the wrong answer, who answered incorrectly, baka kailangan nyo balikan yung lessons nyo on basic accounting, no? Or simply refer back to the PowerPoint slides that I presented earlier, no? I'll also be sharing the recording of this discussion so that you can review it, no? So, kasi na-mention natin kanina, reversing entries, these are optional, no? In such a way that it's simply making our life easier the following period, no? And that's why we are doing some reversing entries, no? Number 4. The double entry accounting system means sige. So the dual effect of each transaction is recorded with the debit and the credit. Kaya nga double entry, no? So there must be a debit and the credit. So 42 got the correct answer. So it's still Rabanera, Bayas, Macalindong, Emperador, and Sanchez. No? So the normal balance of an account is on the okay, so the answer is the side represented by the increase in the account balance. O class, okay, so the correct answer is a debit will increase asset and expense and decrease liabilities, revenue, and equity. Kasi nga, di ba ang debit, ito yung normal side ng asset and expense. That's why there's an increase. And normal side naman ng liabilities, revenue, and equity would be credit. No? Iba. We go now to question number 7. The debit and credit analysis of a transaction normally takes place. Okay, so before an entry is recorded in a journal. Okay. Moving on to question number 8. A journal entry that contains more than 2 accounts is called. Uy, mayabang, mabilis kayo dito ha. Okay, so very good, no? So it's a compound journal entry, which is not a possible combination of a journal entry. Not a possible. Okay, mukhang napaisip dito, no? So, ang daming ano. So, okay, so correct answer is an increase in asset and decrease in equity, no? So, not a possible combination. A chart of accounts is okay, so it's a list of all account titles in the general ledger. Temporary accounts are also known as sige, meron pa rin nagkamali, no? Pero at least the good majority, no? So 53 got the correct answer. It's nominal accounts, no? So temporary accounts are nominal accounts, or these are the accounts in your income statement, in your income. Posting is the process of transferring information from Okay, so posting is simply transferring the entries, no, from your journal to the general ledger. No? So, what function do ledgers serve in the accounting process? Okay, so it's classifying. So recording, summarizing, and reporting. So correct answer is classifying. A trial balance may prove that debits and credits are equal except. Okay, so all of this may prove that debits and credits are equal. So an amount could be entered in the wrong account, transaction could be omitted, and transaction could have been entered twice. Kaya nga nalala ko nung undergrad, ginagawa pag hindi balanse ang trial balance, divided by 2, tapos titignan dun sa ledger kung ano yung may malapit na account, na amount, no, na balanse. Which of the following is not correct about unadjusted trial balance? Not correct daw, class, ha? Okay, so 21 of you got the correct answer. It proves that debit and credits were properly entered in the ledger. Of course, if it's an unadjusted trial balance, this is not a correct statement. No? Adjusting entries affect. Okay, so adjusting entries affect one nominal account and one real account. So meaning one P&L account and one balance sheet account. No? Ito na, yung pinag-usapan natin kanina. What is the adjusting entry for ending inventory? Okay, so correct answer is that it's a debit to ending inventory and a credit to income summary. What is the adjusting entry for doubtful accounts? Okay, so it's debit doubtful account expense and credit allowance for doubtful accounts. So the allowance for doubtful account is a contra account to your accounts receivable. Let's have question number 19. What is the adjusting entry for depreciation? Okay, so 51 got the correct answer. Very good. Siguro ang lesson lang sa atin nitong um, Kahoot Quizzer and the whole discussion, the accounting process is while nasa higher year na tayo, we tend to forget yung mga basic accounting concepts natin, no? Paano kung halimbawa you're very, sabihin na lang natin, technically um, versed with the higher accounting, no? So okay ka sa management accounting, advanced accounting, pero pagdating dun sa theoretical part ng basic accounting, medyo nalalaglag ka. I suggest you go back to your yung theory of accounts kasi dun lumalabas yung mga gantong type of questions, no? So at least 51 got the correct answer. Tignan. Oh, so we're down to our last 6. What is the adjusting entry for accrued expenses? Okay, so good, no? So debit expense and credit accrued expense. So that's your liability. Down to our last 5. What is the adjusting entry for prepaid expenses assuming the expense method is used? Okay, so it's a debit to prepaid expense and credit expenses. Now, I'm sure class, nung naalala mo nung first year ka pa, isa sa mga pinakamahirap na topic sa'yo is yung adjusting entries, no? Pero as you go up, no? Parang ngayon na nasa fourth year ka na, patapos ka na, parang napaka-basic na lang nung adjusting entries, no? Hindi na siya ganun ka-complex. As during that time na tinake up mo siya no, on your first year, no? So, ganun din naman yung naramdaman ko nung nasa undergrad ako, no? So, akala ko nung una, kasi may tendency tayo na mag-memorize, no? So, dapat talaga nag-a-analyze tayo rather than yun nga, ang tendency kasi natin nung first year tayo, nagme-memorize lang. What is the adjusting entry for prepaid expenses assuming the asset method is used? Okay, so it's a debit to expense and credit to prepaid expense. What is the adjusting entry for accrued income? Okay, so it's letter A. I mean, it's debit accrued income and credit income. No? So 29 got the correct answer. Let's have question number 24. What is the adjusting entry for unearned income if the income method is used? Okay, so it's debit income and credit unearned income. No? So 20 got the correct. And we're down to our last question. What is the adjusting entry for unearned income if the liability method is used? Okay, so it's a debit to unearned income and credit income. So let's.
This has been your instructor, Mark Gibson. Thank you for learning with us. See you in our next discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!